Hello and welcome to our Write Book Author Talk. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest today. She's known as the Barefoot Mediator. She's a professional speaker, author, facilitator, mediator, and coach. And in her work, she shows how to create a work culture that is both collaborative and fun. And she shows how to manage the change, the challenge, and the crisis that we all face in business. My guest wrote the authority guide to conflict resolution, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome her today, Jane Gunn. Hello, Jane.
Hello, Sue.
Lovely to see you.
And you.
In your introduction there, we talk about crisis, and I know, you've been working in this field for a very long time. I'm wondering, in all your experience of mediation and working with people in difficult times, have you ever seen things quite as difficult as they are now?
I haven't really, Sue, and I talk about the times we're in. I know we've come through a very difficult 3-year period, and I think that has simply amplified some of the challenges that we would have been going through anyway. But I talk about the time we're in now as a cycle of crises, because there are just so many things that seem to be piled one on top of the other. We've got, financial problems. We've got sort of still coming out of the impacts. Many small businesses still impacted by lockdown and the pandemic that we went through. There were so many issues, whether it's war in Ukraine and a lot of those issues we personally are divided on. We don't agree with each other on those things. So we start off with personal conflict, then we end up with the impact that's having on our businesses. And then we've got at a societal level, how do we actually solve these problems? Because there are crises there and we don't agree necessarily with the way our politicians or global authorities are handling those issues either. So we live in this cycle of crisis and this pool of conflict, really. And so what I want to do is to give people the skills, the principles and tools to guide them through that. How do we think about that? How do we communicate with people we don't necessarily agree with? How do we disagree without being disagreeable?
Yes, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Human, the relationships that we need to maintain and hold together, even during the hardest and most difficult times. And of course, what your book, I was saying to Paul earlier, I love this little one. I'm very proud of all the authority guides, but yours is, if I had a kind of blueprint, for a perfect authority guide, I think yours hits the nail on the head. It's so full of, it's full of your personality, your the way you approach things and your warmth and your genuine desire to really reach out to people and help them to see how to work things out better for themselves. But so practical, so full of really great advice and ideas and exercises for people. Now, interestingly enough, this is now 6 years old and yet still selling well, still being asked for by your colleagues. Paul was saying that we just shipped 35 to a lawyer in Bristol last week or fairly recently, which is wonderful. So, it's still serving the people that you wrote it for, which is marvelous. I wanted to just kind of dig in a little bit here and think about how you work with businesses and think about, because obviously there's a lot in here that people can do for themselves. But you obviously tell us a little bit about how you help people with conflict or with the situations they find themselves when they're facing these difficult problems with relationships or that kind of thing.
Thank you for all those comments, Sue. That's wonderful. And yes, this book is absolutely relevant and right for these times. And so whenever I'm working with a client, and it was a typical example to be working with the 35 copies went, because that was to support a workshop that I was running with a client.
Yes.
And so one of the things I do, in fact, everybody gets a box, a beautiful box, which has got is all lined with tissue, and it comes with a workbook in it, comes with a copy of this book, it comes with a journal in, so all the tools you need to be able to have an ongoing process. So it is never, my work is never a one-stop shop, if you like. It's about, if you're really going to embed the principles that I look at in that book, you've got to be able to do that over time. It doesn't mean you've got to work with me over all that time, but you've got to pick up the responsibility and to do, to do the work, basically. You can't just sort of do a 1 hour workshop and think it's done. And that, so one of the main principles of mediation is self-determination. We take responsibility and accountability for ourselves and for the outcome with the help that we need, but we pick up the ball and we run with it. And so that's one of the key principles. And so then it's about taking people, whatever the process is, whether it's coaching or a workshop or a mediation, step by step through the process, where we identify what the issues are, we look at what's actually going on now, then we look at what, we dig a bit deeper and we look at what's really going on under the surface, what's their experience, what were their expectations, let's explore a little bit more. And then we look at what are all the solutions that might be relevant and appropriate. How do we tease those out? So there's never, again, only one solution. Let's look at all the possible ideas that we could bring out. And then where do we go from there? And it's very much how do we move forward together with this process, and in a way that's not judgmental. So some of the issues about resolving disputes, being in conflict, is that we become very adversarial, we become very divided, we become very black and white in our thinking. One person's right, the other therefore must be wrong. And in mediation, you strip all that away and say, we together have a problem or a situation that we need to look at more deeply, and together we need to look at how do we move forward with that.
And so, as you say, you have all sorts of different ways of working with people. You can send them books, you do workshops with them, you do coaching. You're also a speaker, aren't you, Jane? You go into organizations and speak to people.
Yes, I do. So I think that this, and the book supports me at all those levels, delivering this as a keynote speech, as a workshop, as an interactive workshop, as a support tool for a mediation, or even working with a coaching client. It's relevant at all those levels, because it's really important to leave something behind, and something physical that you can give people, and they can say, oh, I remember that we talked about that with Jane, and they go back to it as a resource. And I think I mentioned to you a while ago, Sue, that somebody had posted on LinkedIn how they were very proud to have a dog-eared copy of my book, because they kept referring back to it so often. The other thing which I did and really supports this book is every chapter is supported by a little video. So I wrote a video course as well. And again, that can be left as a resource for the organization, and they can go back to the mini videos and go, let's watch the video that relates to chapter 1. So, it's all about how do we reinforce and embed these principles, and in a way that's fun as well,
Yeah, absolutely. And it, as you say, it gives people those resources when you can't necessarily be with them in the room. They may call you in. I was quite interested to know, actually, do you find, at what point do people call you in? What do you find it's like? Has everything really broken down and it all needs gluing back together again, and with your help, or do you find that sometimes you're invited into a company where people are actually saying, well, we can see that the writing's on the wall, we're not going in a good direction, maybe we need some preventative help here? I don't know. Or is it a bit of both?
Both. People who know me will invite me in earlier. People who don't know me ask me in too late. And I like to say they've made a mess in the kitchen, and then they want me to come in and tidy up and make them a nice omelette.
But you can do that though, can't you?
I can do a nice omelette. Yeah, I definitely can.
But it's obviously much harder to put it all back together if it's very broken, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah. So we talk about, and it's in the book, we talk about the escalation. It's one of the most important principles to understand, but how quickly a conflict or a situation, a breakdown in a relationship escalates from the time where, two people or a group of people stop talking effectively. And then before you know it, they've started sort of forming groups, telling stories, creating narratives, issuing threats, and then it just descends until it is almost irrecoverable, irreversible. And it is, once you understand how that works, and it's simply a process that we get, it is like being on an escalator. You can't get off unless someone presses that red button and says stop. And we need to step off, and we need to sort of follow some of these principles to get us back up to the top again.
At the risk of getting political, which I don't want to do, I think there may be some leaders in our country right now who perhaps could do with you, Jane. Maybe we need to get you into a certain government.
No, this is right, Sue, because you see, none of us are trained in this stuff. We're not. And, we are trained or we're taught to be very adversarial, to see things right and wrong in a very black and white way. That is the way, our systems are structured in a way, whether we're going through school or university or into politics, and certainly through law school, which I went through. That's how we're taught. And so to step away from that mindset, to step away from that way of seeing things is a real challenge for all of us, and some of us more than others.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you work with all sorts of different kinds of companies? You mentioned the lawyers that the books went to the other day, but obviously I can see how, really in a way your work is relevant to all sorts of different organizations. Tell us a little bit about some of the sort of people that you work with. And obviously you can't name names, we understand.
No, I can't do that, but yes. So recently I've worked with, and a lot of my work actually since, in the last 3 years has ended up being overseas without me needing to go overseas, which has been interesting.
Right.
So I worked recently with a partnership that was in California. And this is a business partnership, but where they've got some relationship issues and needed to resolve those. I've worked with another larger company where they had some boardroom issues that they needed to resolve. And so that was a mediation. We came in and looked at how they could move forward with that. And very often it's at a stage where you're thinking, are people staying or are they going? Are we able to resolve these issues so that they can continue working together? Or do they need to agree a kind of exit strategy? And those are very important conversations as well.
Yes, I guess, of course, there's the whole thing of, what I love in your book is the way you talk about a living contract. And that's something that I think, it's so interesting, because actually the whole concept of understanding that no matter how much we love each other at the start of something, that things happen, things can go wrong, things can go awry. Communication can just take a wrong turn, or whatever it is that happens, we can suddenly find ourselves in that position of conflict. And I love the idea that actually when people start working together, that they have these parameters that they can work around, that they can sit down and work together on, and then actually that is something that lives and breathes. It isn't stuck in a drawer, as you say, but it's something that you can continue to use. Do you always encourage the people you work with to create these living contracts to help them?
I do. So I sent it to someone about 10 minutes ago, actually, to say, yes, they'd come up with a situation. I said, I think you need to have a look at this idea of a living contract. And I myself had it. I was in a partnership with a colleague who's sadly no longer with us, which is why we're no longer in partnership. But we had this, and we, as you say, we were very firm friends, but we knew working in this field that there would be things we would disagree about. And so we went through this process to say, let's have this framework. And we also agreed that our friendship took precedence. You know, if things started to fall apart, it was the business that we would sacrifice, not the friendship. And, you know, sometimes you have to make that choice, and sometimes it's the business that survives and the friendship that goes. But you know, you can make those kind of thought processes, you can make those sort of commitments at the beginning. And it definitely is about revisiting. We don't do enough of revisiting. Are we still on track? You see, one of the things that can happen nowadays is a business can go through financial struggles because of the times we're in, or the alternative is the business grows, you know, and can absolutely take off. And one person says, I liked it as it was. I liked this small business and I don't want to go global, you know, and I like having time at home and being able to put, and the other person says, no, you know, I really want this thing to grow. And so there's all sorts of stages in a business development that require us to revisit, where are we going and are we still on the same page? And it's not about whether we like each other or not. It's, are we really, you know, are we still able to move together through this process of growth? And sometimes we're really not.
That's true. I guess sometimes, you know, in the work that you do, you must occasionally come across people who just do need to part ways for whatever reason. But absolutely. To be able to do that without having a war, you know, is, I guess, where we're going here. It's not always necessarily about staying married, but it's about finding a comfortable way to part.
So 2 clients came to me recently with that specific aim. They said, we are going to part ways, but we'd like to do it with grace and ease. And that was their brief to me. You know, we don't want to end up fighting. We know we need some help, but we want to part ways with grace and ease. And I thought that was lovely. And that was the thing we revisited from time to time. Are we still managing this with grace and ease? And it's a lovely phrase, actually, and a lovely mindset to be able to approach something with.
Isn't it just? And I guess your living contract, if everyone has one, would really help with that, actually. But
it would, yes.
I love that, with grace and ease. Wonderful. So this little book has served you well. I'm glad to hear. That's really good. And also very interesting. I note that, you know, what you said about the fact that your business has gone international, but that you've not had to actually travel as much as perhaps you used to pre-pandemic. Which is great. And isn't that true perhaps of all of us, in a way, that many of us are in businesses that can now be increasingly international? And I wonder how much the book helps with that, because in a sense it does give you that global presence as well. So, you know, the idea of books being able to reach any bit of the world, really, these days, sometimes, you know, by pursuing translation rights, as I know you and I have looked at a couple of times. We've not actually achieved it yet with this book, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't achieve it. And the more your business goes international, the more likely it is we'll find a market for the book in those markets. So, you know, it goes both ways, doesn't it? It gives you a presence out there, but it also gives a possibility for your book to have a presence.
I think that's right, Sue. And I think the fact that, you know, you've got books on Kindle, you know, you've got electronic versions that people can have. Of course, they do like the physical version. So we'd often have to find a way to sort of get it to people if they're overseas, and they do love to receive a copy. But to me, as much as anything, it's also a business card. You know, you can get, if you give a copy to somebody, they're so delighted and they never forget that you gave them that book to take away and remember you by. And you'd be going to their office, you find it, there it is, pride of place on their desk. So, you know, it's worth remembering the value of a book. It has huge value. It isn't about, and you and I know that, it isn't about selling lots and lots of copies and making lots of money. It has a much more intrinsic value than that, which is about, you know, your authority, your expertise, and how you position yourself, and how you provide and leave behind, you know, that piece of information for your client when you're not there.
Yeah, It's I sometimes think of books as being like sort of mini versions of you. You know, they really are. You've got like a little army of mini yous, and they're able to go out in the world and do your work for you. And I think, again, you know, as I said earlier, and I think your style is lovely, and I think that you've found your voice in your books, and that's something that I think is special, because it really does mean that people can take you with them, and have you there to with great practical stuff as well, but also, you know, a reminder of the work that you do, and the work that you perhaps have done with them or could do with them in the future. So, well, lots of possibilities. We now have we're getting more and more distribution across the world. So we've got a new distributor in India we've just signed up with, which is lovely. That means your book is now available across India. So who knows? Somebody there might well be knocking on your door, having seen the book. But yeah, and as a speaker, I guess, I mean, you said earlier, you know, it's that physical presence, that ability to leave something with the person that when you've been speaking, you know, the keynote, if you've done a keynote or whatever, then, you know, you have an opportunity to leave your book with your audience, which is great.
Yes, and as you know, Sue, in the book, the illustrations are cartoons. So you know, although it's a serious topic, and I'm a lawyer, I've diverted from the sort of serious style of most books in this genre by including cartoons, and those then feature in my presentations. So then people can say, oh, I saw that on the screen, and there it is in the book. And there's that continuity as well, but also, again, that sort of likeness and sense of fun. There's one character, I should have brought him up actually, but there's one character who appears everywhere in my book and in my slides, is Morris the Mole.
Yes.
And so the catchphrase from my work has always been making molehills out of mountains. And then Morris the Mole has become a character, and he's in all of my work. And I've actually got, you know, a physical mole who goes with me. And it's lovely that you can introduce this sort of character that people don't forget.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. He's a great example of your style, and the really fun element that you put into something that actually could potentially be quite a difficult subject in some ways, but you do bring lightness and fun to it. It's lovely. We've sort of coming to the end of our time together, but I did just want to just say a few words to anyone who might be listening out there, who might want to find Jane and discover a little bit more about the work that she does. And if anybody is thinking that perhaps they could do with her help, to reach out, you can find Jane on LinkedIn. You can also listen to her podcast, and find out more about her at her website, www.janegunn.co.uk. Nice and straightforward there. The Authority Guide, of course, is available to buy at your favourite online retailer, or from our bookstore, which is writebookpress.com. And I think there might be a special offer on that at the moment, because you're here as our guest on our author talk. So I suspect that there's a deal going on that, which is lovely. Lots and lots of fabulous things have been said about this book, but a few snippets. What a fantastic book, full of gems and words of wisdom. I love it. It's structured in a way that's easy to use and is littered with good examples and ideas, and highly recommended, concise and well laid out. Jane's book is an invaluable guide to dealing with conflict in the workplace. So that's kind of brings us to the end, I think, Jane. But thank you so much for taking this time to spend with us, to tell us about this incredibly important work that you do, and to talk about your book. If anybody out there would like to know a bit more about how they can write and publish their own book, we do actually offer a free discovery call to anyone who might wish to spend a little bit of time digging in to see how you might find a way of creating not just a business card, but a mini you, a brilliant little book that helps you to do even better work with your clients and your prospective organizations that you'd like to work with, perhaps. So once again, Jane, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue.
Being with us, and continued good fortune with your lovely little book and the wonderful work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Such a pleasure.
So that was the wonderful Jane Gunn. Thank you, Jane. We have another couple of discovery calls coming up. I believe the 5th of July and the 6th of July. You will see them on our LinkedIn page at The Right Book Company, and also on my personal profile, Sue Richardson on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye-bye.